Hello, Asa. How are you? Welcome to another episode of Freshly Pressed. Today we have with us Asa from the creator of Sagas of the Shield Maiden. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for having me and talking about Sagas of the Shield Maiden.
Awesome. Well, before we kick off, I would love to know a bit about yourself and how you got into comics.
Okay, into comics in general or into comics writing,
Well, into comics in general to start with, and then we'll get to
and then we'll
writing.
move on to write. Yeah, okay, cool. So comics in general, um, I read a lot, kind of like growing up, but bits and pieces in the UK in the newsagents. There's a publisher called Panini who do a lot of the kind of like European collections of like Marvel books and DC books and stuff like that. And they would sell newsagents, kind of almost like new shop editions of stuff. It would normally be two totally unconnected stories, possibly from like multiple different characters. Sometimes it would just the issue would be called Daredevil and Punisher, and it would just be one Daredevil story and one Punisher story, nothing to do with them crossing over at all. Um, so there was a lot of that kind of stuff, and then a kind of big institution in comics in the UK is things like the Beano and the Dandy, which are kind of uh, more comic strip stuff. So it's maybe like 1 or 2 page strips that in that form like a longer
Mm,
kind of
mm.
magazine. So that was kind of the first step into it. And then my stepdad, who is or was kind of big into comics, he doesn't read as much anymore. I've kind of taken over that for him. But he had a big collection, and I would read through his stuff and then we would go to the comic shop, and kind of that was my first experience of actual comic shops, not just
Right.
oh here's is it hidden behind like all the magazines and it's just shoved in a corner of
Yeah,
like WH Smith's or something like that.
yeah. No, that's amazing. I think we had something similar. I come from India originally, and in India they never used to be comic book shops at all till very recently.
Yeah.
We always used to go to either bookstores or when we have train stations where on train stations we have like
Oh
these
yes.
bookstore. Yeah,
Yeah.
bookstalls where they have a huge section of comics. But yeah, and I can totally relate to what you're saying about like two seemingly not connected comics bundled up together
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
same way. Yeah,
Yeah. The only connection is that there's a Marvel label on it and nothing else.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a unique thing, right? I don't think
Yeah.
a lot of other countries have that at all.
Yeah, I don't I'd be surprised if like kind of the US does it because they have such the inbuilt structure for it, and they were
Yeah,
selling comics just at newsagents anyway before comic shops existed. So it's
yeah.
almost like a backward step for everywhere else where comic shops existed, but then it's like right, well they don't have them yet, or there's not as many, so let's
Mm,
chuck in just wherever we can get them and all the stories were like years behind what actual like kind of current comics were, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
just a mishmash of what they could put together.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome. And yeah, so how did you actually get into writing comics then?
So I kind of, as I'm sure most comic readers did, as a kid, I like wrote and drew my own stuff. The illustrations were never great. I mean, the writing was never that great either. So it was just something that you did as a kid because you enjoyed stuff. It's kind of like the fan fiction element of it. It's just
Mm,
writing your own stories with characters that you like kind of already knew.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I kind of did that growing up, and then kind of like dropped it. And I've always enjoyed making stories in one way or another. And so I went to university for film and television production. So kind
Right.
of like making films and stuff like that. And I did that for a little bit, and I always enjoyed the script writing more than I enjoyed the actual making of the films or doing anything kind of like that. I always enjoyed the writing part of it. And
Mm.
so after I kind of left uni, I started to think about like what I wanted to do, and I loved comics so much just throughout that time. I still read them, I still kind of consumed them,
Yeah,
and I was just like, oh well, let's like maybe I should try and do one of these. Like
yeah,
let's see what that's like. And I did, and I kind of started to like think about it, started to figure out what it would be. There was a lot of, oh, I don't want to do this idea first because it's too good an idea to do now when I'm not going to be
yeah.
very good at writing it. I want to save it for later. So there was a lot of kind of putting it off for myself. And then eventually I started doing it. And once I started doing it, I basically have not been able to stop since then.
That's so good. No, I think there's a lot of similarities between writing a screenplay and writing comics, because you have to visualize a lot of things in your mind, and you also have, like, obviously with comics you have slightly different constraints of like panels and
Yeah.
how the art would come out like, but in the end you can actually visualize almost every screenplay as a comic, not the other way around, but
Yeah,
you know.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting as well that, especially from the writing point of it, writing a film script and writing a comic script are similar in execution if they're not similar in like the exact format,
yeah,
because what you're doing as a writer is you are, if you're just the writer on a film, obviously if you're kind of making the film yourself, but it's totally different atmosphere. But if you're just the writer on a film and you're just the writer on the comic, what you're doing is you're writing words so that somebody else can interpret them visually. And
right,
so, kind
right.
of taking that from writing film scripts to writing comic scripts is a much easier gap, because you've
Mm.
already had the idea of, right, I need to, if you're writing a film script, I need to tell the actor what they need to know, and the director and the cinematographer what they need to see and what they need to show the audience. And when you're writing a comic, you're basically doing that, but there's just one or two people on the other side of it rather than hundreds of crew and
Yeah,
everything like
yeah,
that.
absolutely, absolutely. I think we'll do a slight segue from here. Maybe walk us through your process of writing a little bit. How do you come up with, say, idea for a comic book to, or a story for that matter? Like, it doesn't need to be the entire comic book, but for a story, from your idea to, say, a finished script.
So, idea wise, it's normally a random thought that I will have at any point in the day. Um, I don't think I've ever, unless I'm kind of doing a submission for an anthology or something like that, I very rarely sit down and go, okay, I'm going to think of an idea now. I normally will just like be going about day to day life, either walking to work or kind of just like being around the house, and I'll something will just pop, and I'll think, oh, that's like the very small seed of an idea that I can use later down the line.
Mm,
And then from that, I'll make a note of it somewhere. I'll either write it down, I'll put it in like notes or Google Doc on my phone, and just have an idea, and it'll be a sentence. And
yeah.
then whenever I find the time, I'll go back to that sentence and I'll flesh it out to like a paragraph.
Mm,
And then I'll work out, okay, what do I want to do with this story? Is there something that uh, I want to do differently? Is there something that I would like to do in terms of the format or the way that it's presented? And then from that, I'll handwrite a lot of notes. So
mm,
once I've got the kind of idea down, I will normally handwrite as much of the full synopsis, so as much of the kind of breakdown of the whole story as I can, and I'll handwrite it. I've got copious amounts of notebooks that I try and neatly organize and doesn't work. Um, and so I'll handwrite maybe a page or two that's just the full breakdown of the story, and that will kind of develop as I'm doing it. And so the sentence that I had from the beginning is now like 2 pages, but it's
Right.
totally different normally.
Mm.
Normally, the 2 pages are, even if they're just like more fleshed out, they're just a very different idea than that initial thought. And then from that, I like to do a lot of the kind of pre-prep handwritten. So I'll write the
Mm.
full, if it's like, say that I've decided I'm going to do 6 issues, or that's
Mm.
kind of like my plan, is that I want to work out if I can do 6 issues with this like one story. Then
Yep.
what I'll do is I'll break down the first issue. So if I've got the idea for the whole plot, then I'll think, okay, what would go in the first issue? And if it's a quarter of the story, then I'll probably go, okay, well, maybe this is 4 issues, not six. Or
Right.
if it's more, maybe it's, oh, this is a longer format one shot, and I'll just make it twice the length rather than doing kind of three overstretched issues. And
Right.
that kind of just develops as I'm working on it. And then from that, I'll keep handwriting. So then once I've figured out what I'm doing in terms of the like presentation, I'll figure out, I'll do a page by page breakdown. So I'll
Mm.
know what the whole story is, and I'll handwrite page by page breakdown. So it will just be maybe a couple of words or a sentence per page, and it will just be like page one, da 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 happens, page two, this
Right.
happens. And then once I've done that, that's when I probably will move over to Google Docs, and I'll kind of set the script document up. And then it
Yep.
will take me too long to transfer between handwritten, because now I'm at a stage where it becomes more real.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and then I'll start doing panel breakdowns, and so I kind of start very vague, and then as I go on, I become more and more specific until I
Mm.
have a draft that has the majority of the correct panels in the right places. I
Mm.
normally don't start with dialogue unless I've already got a good idea for like what the interaction or the dialogue will be. The way
Right.
that I normally write it is I will write descriptions of what the dialogue is. So I'll like, maybe I'll do, page six, panel one, this conversation happens. Here are the things
Yeah.
that we find out, or here are the things that this person says, kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
vagaries. And then I'll go back later on, uh, and kind of break it down and refine it a bit more. I
Yeah.
find one of the scariest things as a writer is looking at a blank page. So anything that I can do to make sure that it's not a blank page,
Yeah.
it just helps me immensely. And it just means that,
Yeah.
oh, I can go back and I can go, right, I'm going to work on pages 1 to 10 today, but they're
Yeah.
already there. It's just refining it. It's not like I have to
Yes.
create something new entirely.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
so yeah,
That's yeah.
then it's just refining it until it's a script. I'll then send it to an editor who will give me a bunch of notes to make it even better. I'll do all that, all those changes, and then it will go off to an artist. Then, based on what the artist does, I might change a few things here and there. If the artist has portrayed something better in the art than I expected, and I don't need a certain line, or I don't need to say something, I'll change it or I'll take it out. Or
Yeah.
so even when the art's done, I'm still kind of looking at it a little bit and trying to make it as best as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's amazing, and thank you for walking us through the whole
That's all right.
process. Yeah, because I do something similar in terms of in terms of writing the dialogue, because I find it very interesting that I think very, especially at the lettering stage, when the letterer starts working with the dialogue, it's extremely important for I do very heavy editing for the dialogue, and actually
Right.
the real dialogue actually comes when the letterer is lettering it, or sometimes uh, I do the lettering, but
Sure.
uh, that's the stage when I actually write the final dialogue. Till then, it's just, and I like some of the ideas around
Yeah.
what the dialogue would be, and because that's when you actually see how it fits into that panel and how it fits into the scene and things like that. So yeah, um,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you might send a script that has a page that has 4 panels on it, and then your artist does such an amazing job and breaks it into 6 panels because they've had a cool idea for something. And so suddenly the dialogue pacing has changed because you don't have 4 panels anymore, you've now got 6. And so you've
yep,
got to figure out how that fits perfectly. Do you still just have it in the first 4, or do you split it between those extra ones? Or yeah, so it is always like, because comics is such a visual medium, you do
yeah,
still kind of have to wait until you can visually see it before the writer's job is kind of fully done.
absolutely true, absolutely true. That's awesome. Cool. Let's talk a bit about Sagas of the Shield Maiden. Do you want to give us a bit of like a quick spiel on what the book is
Sure.
about and what the whole series is about?
Sure. So, Sagas of the Shield Maiden is, in the most simplified of terms, and this is the one sentence this is the kind of like idea that I had initially, was what if there was a Western, but it was set in the Viking time period? And that's basically the easy pitch.
Yep.
So it follows the main character, who is a nameless shield maiden, like the kind of cowboys of spaghetti westerns or the samurais of kind of old school cinema, and she just travels the land. And the first 2 books are anthology stories that are all about kind of different points in her life. They show her at different ages or with different people. I kind of hint at relationships that she has with these characters that maybe will be fleshed out later on, but they aren't necessarily needed to be
Mm.
super fleshed out right at the beginning for you to kind of enjoy the story. So it is that kind of, it's anthology, but it's all the same character.
That's what makes it quite unique, I think. Um, in terms of, I love that you have a lot of different like art styles and also all the stories have like slightly different texture to them. So I feel that that gives a very good layer, an extra layer to the book. It does add to the character a little bit as well, of both the book and and the character of Shield Maiden, because it is obviously one part comics is obviously one part writers medium and one part artist's medium, right? So
Yeah,
it is an artist's interpretation of the character that comes out in a lot of like all the different styles of different stories. So yeah, it's I enjoyed book 1 and 2 a lot. They're really really good. A
thank
lot
you.
of these stories, yeah. And I also love the fact that some of the stories have actually like quite less dialogue, and like it's just completely visual, and you can they're simple enough to actually follow directly from panel to panel without like a dialogue heavy setup. So yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean the my kind of the cheat that I like to say that I did Shield Maiden for is to just give me the opportunity to work with as many artists as possible. So a lot of comic writers, you write like one series and you work with one artist, and it might be great, and you might love working with that artist. And I've definitely found artists that I've really liked working with
mm,
doing Shield Maiden and worked with them again.
yeah,
But the amount of artists I've worked with over the 3 books of Shield Maiden so far is more than I think, especially in indie comics, when you're
yeah,
not releasing as much, you're not on a monthly schedule, you're not working on like 3 or 4 books at once. It gives
yeah,
me that opportunity to just work with as many amazing artists as possible.
absolutely, absolutely. This variant cover by Partridge for the third one is amazing. I think they're one of the best artists working in indie comics right now. I feel like that.
Yes, Skylar did an amazing job. It was super cool to work with her, and yeah, I love the cover. Um, as always, like she kind of gave me a few different options, and this one just immediately, like, they were all great, but this one just immediately came out to me. It was super cool. I loved the like kind of the like frantic nature of like mid battle. The other two covers, so for the book one and then book two, are much more kind of like calmer and a bit more like serene images. But this one was something that was different, something that we hadn't had before for a
Yeah.
Shield Maiden book. Um,
No, that's amazing. And I think when the first time I saw their work was from Fellhound's books, I think.
oh
And
yeah,
yeah, some of their covers there are like mind blowing. So good.
yeah, yeah. She's in some really cool. I think she did a Poison Ivy cover recently that looked amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was super cool to work with her. And like everybody on Shield Maiden that I've worked with, it's all come from me just randomly emailing people. Um, and it is really taking that risk of just going, I think your stuff is cool. Do you want to do this? And it's great the amount of people that have said yes.
That's so good. I think comic book industry is kind of quite open to a lot of like new experiences and talking to
Yeah,
new people and making new connections. Because this whole show actually, like a year ago, there was nothing. Like I didn't have this show, and it was just me sending DMs to people on Twitter, trying to get guests for the show.
yeah,
So, yeah,
but it
but
works. People love comics. People want to talk about comics. People want to be involved in comics. It's just yeah, it's easy to convince people when they like what you're
yes,
doing, what they're doing.
absolutely. No, and I think I feel that people are quite open. They're quite willing to talk, and they're extremely kind and generous as well. Like the amount of
Yeah, definitely.
generosity shown by the community to both the show, and I see that on. I know there's a lot of like social media is kind of the thing which highlights negative more than positive, but there is a lot of kindness and camaraderie in the whole comic book, especially indie comic side, industry as in general.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you're right. I think a lot of the negativity gets picked up on much easier, and people point it out more, and it's easier to find. But there is a lot of positivity. There's so many people just kind of like boosting each other, especially with like crowdfunding stuff. Everybody is kind of like supporting each other and kind of pushing each other's work in front of new people. And that's always amazing. And I mean, like, I think especially for me, as much as it seems to be like slowly setting itself on fire at the moment, Twitter has been amazing for Shield Maiden in particular, because without Twitter, there are a lot of artists who I would just never have worked with, because
Yeah,
I just would never have come across their work. I would never have like seen that they were looking for work. I mean, the first book, which you had the cover up earlier on the Streamlabs, the artist, yeah, so this one, the artist of that, Sweeney Boo, I saw just a random tweet that she was looking for extra cover work, and
wow.
I hadn't found a cover artist yet. I wasn't sure who I was gonna like go for, and I saw that, and I just thought, oh, you know what, let's just try. And so I just sent her an email, and then that was it. Like, it
Wow.
was done. And but without that, and now for me, that image is such an iconic image to do with Shield Maiden,
Yeah.
and it looks amazing, and I love it. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't randomly come across that tweet. And there are a couple of other people who I've also had that kind of relationship with, where I've just
Yep.
seen that they're looking for extra work, or I put a call out on Twitter, and like the amount of amazing replies I've had like has just astounded me. And then I've had to go through and make the very difficult decision of like who to pick. But I've still got people who replied. So when I did the first book, I put a big call out to like get some new artists and pin-up artists and things like that. And I still go back to that tweet from 3 years ago, and I'm still using people from that. I'm
Wow.
still going back and going, right, this person is really cool and amazing artist, but I have just not had a chance to work with them or do anything with them. But now is the opportunity, and now I can, and now I have something. And it's not it's not necessarily that they weren't good enough. It's just that there were too many good people, and
Yeah.
there has if I'm only doing 5 pinups, for example, there has to be a choice of 5. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean those other people aren't going to come in. When I did the first Shield Maiden book, I think I started and I was only going to do 3 pinups,
Yep.
and there was too many people to choose from that I just had to do 5. And so
That's
now I've
amazing.
built it in that every book
Yep.
has five pinups, and
Mm.
uh, I've shot myself in the foot a little bit because it means I have to find 5 new
Yep.
artists to work with every single book.
Wow.
Uh, but I just get amazing new versions of the character, which
Yeah.
is super cool to do.
Yeah. It is super cool. Totally. And I mean, hats off to you. It is quite a bit of like logistics to get everything going with five different artists doing 5 pinups
Yeah,
and bookmarks
yeah.
and everything. Yeah. Do you have any like what kind of rewards do you have on issue 3?
So for issue 3, we've got the issue both digitally and physically. The thing that I really kind of like to do with the Shield Maiden books, and the thing that makes it a bit different, is the format is quite a lot larger.
Mm.
So a normal comic book um, which is like US standard size. The Shield Maiden books are both wider and taller, so they're more like a kind of magazine format. So, like a lot of the Black Label DC stuff that's been coming out at the moment, that like slightly bigger size. The I don't know if you've read the Wonder Woman Olympia or Olympia Historia. I think that's what it's called.
Yes. Yeah.
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 So it's that kind of size, which I just really like to showcase the physical version of that, because it is a bigger comic. So yeah, you
Yeah.
can get the physical and digital. You can also pick up the first 2 books as well, although the stories are for the most part all individual, and you don't have to have read books 1 and 2 to fully understand 3. Obviously, there is always, if you have read them, you're going to get more out of it than if
Mm.
you haven't. So you can pick up the first 2 books. There's also print sets. So the print set for book 3, which I've been revealing on my Twitter recently. Um, those you can get those. They're all like A5 prints, and
Mm.
there's 5 pinups, and then one of Scarlet Partridge's cover. So the print set is 6 prints. Then a lot of my back catalogue of comics,
Yep.
all the stuff that I've done over the last like few years. And then last year I did a campaign for an enamel pin. So it's a kind of small enamel pin of the Shield Maiden's head. It
Nice.
looks super cool. I was super happy with it, and so I've added those to the campaign as well. So a lot of just different kinds of comics, as well as the Shield Maiden stuff on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing. That's pretty good. I think I also like it's good that like your rewards are really nice, and so, when you get a physical book you actually feel like it's worth it because it's quite big, and yeah, especially for someone like me, if I fund it, like I have to pay a lot of like very high shipping costs because of
Yeah,
being in Australia.
yeah,
Say uh, I remember I backed a comic scene because you're from UK, you might know comic
yes,
scene. Yeah, they had
yeah.
this history of comics Kickstarter, like I
Oh
think.
yes, yeah. I know. I think I remember the one. Yeah,
Yeah, I think they do it every year. They haven't done it this year or like in 2022, but they like 2021 was quite a big campaign. And I backed that, and when I received those, I was like, these are amazing. The quality and the size. it was totally worth it. Like they're beautifully printed, they're so good, so well done, beautifully written articles in that magazine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, you're totally right. If you get a physical thing, you want it to be, especially with indie stuff, which you've got to pay a bit more for because the creators making them are having to pay a bit more because they're only printing 100, 200, not 10,000.
Yep.
So everything's a bit more expensive. And so, as a creator, I want to make sure that somebody is getting their money's worth as much as they can be. So making Shield Maiden bigger, making it more of a kind of like a premium book rather than just a smaller book was important to me. And then also it helped with the storytelling aspect because it was supposed to be replicating like westerns and like spaghetti western
Mm,
cinema, which was a lot of kind of like very wide angles and very long, like wide shots. I wanted, yeah, so like the stuff that's on the screen at the moment, I wanted to be able to present that and have
yeah.
that in a way that it complemented the storytelling as well as just being like a cool piece of like comics that you just could hold in your hand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's totally fair, and uh I think it should work. Sounds amazing.
Thank you.
When is the campaign launching?
So the campaign launches on the 2nd of May, so Tuesday the 2nd of May.
It's tomorrow.
So yeah, tomorrow for you. It's a couple of days for me.
Tomorrow for me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, um, but yeah, don't scare me like that. But yeah, so I've been putting the final touches to it today. That's where most of my day has been. Um, but yeah, I'm excited. Always nervous about launching new Kickstarters, but I'm very excited to get it going and to show off even more of it to everybody because it's amazing. One of my favorite things being a comics writer is seeing an email come in from an artist and being able to look at those pages. And the only thing that's maybe slightly better than that is when I get to show them to other people.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
when I get that initial email, it's amazing. I love it. I love looking at the pages. And then when I can show somebody else and see their reaction,
Yeah.
it's just great.
Oh yeah, that's the best. Yeah, for me, I think the best is obviously when someone sees it and I see their reaction, and then the second best thing is looking at the proofs when the proofs
Yeah,
come in
yeah,
from a printer. Just looking at that, it that's the real stuff. That looks so real now.
yeah. Holding the kind of finished physical copy in my hand is
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Although
exactly.
holding the finished physical copy in my hand also means I've probably got way too many boxes in the house because I've got to pack all the Kickstarter orders up. So it's a double-edged sword. It's
I
great, but
know.
then I then turn to my right and I see 20 boxes all packed, and I've got to fill them all out. And yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, I mean that's also just signing those books and sending them off to the people is yeah,
yeah,
it's very satisfying in the end. It's
yeah,
very tiring, very intense, the
yeah,
whole process, but it's quite satisfying.
yeah. And when you start getting those like tweets or people posting on Instagram that they've received it, that's where it's worth it again.
Yeah,
All those late nights that you've spent packing them and putting all the addresses on, it's suddenly worth it again once you see that people have got them and they're excited to read them.
nice. Absolutely true. I 100% agree on that. That's cool. We're coming to time, but thanks again for coming on the show. I
Yeah, thank
really
you so
had a
much for having me.
good time. Yeah. And yeah, please do check out Sagas of the Shield Maiden. Follow Asa on Twitter. We'll put all the links in the video description and put it all on social media. So be sure to follow the campaign. Launches on 2nd of May, wherever you are. So
Yeah,
yeah, great having you on the show, Asa. Uh, yeah, thank you so much.
thanks so much for having me.